This is Dennis Raimondi. I'm here with my co-host, Phil Goldberg. Our podcast, Spirit Matters, found at spiritmatterstalk.com. We want to first thank those people that have been contributing to keep us on the air. And we're not a nonprofit, but if you want to help us out, you can go to our website, spiritmatterstalk.com, and you'll see where you go there to help keep us in business. We have about, 280 shows now in our archives, many great guests, including the guest we have today. Our guest today, Acharya Shunya. She is a wisdom teacher and catalyst for empowering health and elevating consciousness worldwide. She is an award-winning, internationally renowned author, speaker, and scholar of non-dual wisdom and classically trained master of yoga and Ayurveda. Her new book, Sovereign Self, we'll be talking about today. And I also want to mention her podcast, Shadow to Self. And thank you so very much for taking the time to come on with us today.
Such a pleasure, Dennis. And thank you so much, Phil, for having me here.
It's our pleasure, Shunya. Fill our listeners in. We'll get to the topic of your new book and other things. Fill us in on your spiritual background, where it arose and what brought you to the work you do here in the U.S. and your new book.
Well, my ancestors have been living in a tiny holy city in northern India, which you're very familiar with, which is Ayodhya.
Actually, never been there, but I will.
Oh, I must invite you there then.
Yes.
So my ancestors have been there, and we trace our ancestry to the Rig Veda, and our ancestors are supposed to have been teaching this knowledge, and we're householder sages. And I think karma decided that I would fulfill something I must have started in previous lifetimes. I was born as the granddaughter of the teacher who taught through the 20th century, who was the son of a great saint in the 19th century. And I'm the first female lineage holder, and I think I'm making my lineage proud. So that's.
And were you named lineage holder by your grandfather?
Yes, yes. He chose me at the age 24, though I didn't take on my first spiritual student until 40. And I was just doing the work, trying to be that person that would not then look back once I started.
I have a question. When you were growing up, you come from a spiritual tradition. You come from Ayodhya, which I associate, I believe, with the Ramayana. Acharya, when you were a young child, did you feel this was your destiny, or is it something that came later in life?
No, I didn't understand words like destiny back then. I was a child, but I was always curious and I was always learning. And I was steeped in the learning, but all these words like steeped in learning came later. It was part of our life to go to school and to study the scripture, the Shastra with our teacher. And he chose me among other girl students, and the Gurukulam, our wisdom school, had been open to the female gender 1935 onwards. It was not a big deal for me to study. And in fact, I had my own shadow. I had my doubts, I had my distractions, and India was changing, the world was changing, and I was influenced by Western teachings, philosophy. I was much more, I had a more contemporary upbringing than my grandfather, great-grandfather, who were more steeped in the traditional path. I had all of it. And then I had to come to it. I had to come back to it. I even had a period of not wanting to be a part of it, in all honesty. And then I had to reclaim it. And I think this whole process allows me to be a 21st century teacher, instead of saying, I was born in it, I knew my destiny,
Right.
and yay, it didn't happen like that with me.
And also, if I understand the chronology correct, you didn't actually begin teaching until you were already a household. You had a child, and you were in the U.S.
Yes, I was in the U.S. I mean, I've always been teaching from a young age assisting my grandfather. I was writing. I was, because Ayurveda and yoga are part of our lineage, I was also doing small amounts of teaching, even prior to my marriage and then through my marriage. But to be on the world stage, to write the books I'm writing, to be an advisor to the government of India now on these matters, this is all has come once I felt I'm honestly ready to carry this lineage forward. Part of an ancient lineage is we have a lot of checks and balances. So we don't go on a world tour declaring ourselves as an Acharya unless we feel we are ready. And I had my own parameters to match.
Mhm. I wanted to ask, I was reading about you, and one you in one of the areas where I was reading, you speak about the four Vedic aims of life. And could you tell us what those are?
Indeed, dharma, artha, kama, moksha. These are the four given aims that are supposed to help every embodied soul find their purpose in a day-to-day sense and in the larger bird's eye view. And artha kama, which is artha means survival, profession, basic material prosperity. Kama means pleasure for pleasure's sake. No explanations needed.
Mhm.
Artha kama come naturally to all human beings. Dharma, which is a conscious way of life, and moksha, which is the falling away of all delusions, the kshaya of moha, the falling away of all misconceptions to recognize your true light nature. These come through instruction, sacred discipline, and a sacred perseverance to find our true path. And all our lives, I think the three of us here, we can all attest to dharma and moksha making us more than we thought we were.
Mhm.
This pursuit.
Shunya, I want to get back to the idea of lineage. You are a lineage holder. Many of the teachers who become famous, and some of the ones that just have small followings, are they're not part of a lineage. They are self-anointed in a sense, and or have had a certain realization and body of study and begin to teach without a connection to a lineage. What are the risks of that? What are the values and virtues of being associated with a lineage, and how important do you think that is?
A lineage is known as a sampradaya, and a lineage holds the knowledge. See, in the Vedic tradition, the teacher is only a conduit of eternal knowledge in the Vedas. So it was not, the teacher is not worshipped or put on a stage. A teacher is a transmitter of accurate knowledge. And every sampradaya or lineage has mastered certain texts versus other texts, a certain path like karma yoga or jnana yoga or bhakti yoga, or and which Veda, Riga, Sam, Yajura, Tharva, which Ved, etc. So when you come from a lineage, you have clarity on the sequential knowledge. You have clarity of the path versus just making it up as you go. And you also have do's and don'ts of Acharya Dharma, teacher's Dharma, Shishya Dharma, when you are a Shishya, disciple, what is that Dharma? What are our boundaries? What happens if, and we are even informed of like karmic and other transgressions, consequences of our transgressions. So in a way, a sampradaya prepares us for whatever dharma we have to lead. Not every student becomes an acharya, and probably that is why it took me a while to step into being the acharya that my teacher had seen I would become,
Mhm.
because of being in the lineage. And sometimes if we do things too quickly, then, along with hurting others who are sincere seekers, we ourselves get caught up in a web of self-deception, is what I would say. Also, we're not know-it-all teachers in the Vedic tradition. It is the Shastra which is self-revealed. So we know where to go to look for answers. So if somebody asks me something that I don't have a direct relationship with that question, because that's not been my question, I can go back to the works of Vyasacharya, Shankaracharya, Atma Prakashacharya, Ayodhyanatacharya. These are my ancestors. I can go back, I can learn, and I can say, well, a couple of people have seen it this way, maybe it's going to work for you. So the lineage prevents the misinformation. I think ultimately it was the guardianship of the knowledge, not secrecy, but the correct transmission, and also the disciplines that should be had within us in terms of our diet, lifestyle, morality, to be able to bring it together. So being a 21st century Acharya, when my marriage fell apart, the first one, it was like, whoa, I don't know where to go now to see if I can be an Acharya or not. And so then the best thing I thought was, let me talk about it. Let me put it out there. Let me say, look, this is what happens in the 21st century, but this is how I use the wisdom to come into alignment with my path. So ultimately, it is the Shastra or this the text or the written and orally transmitted teachings, which are the teacher. And
Dennis,
we
can I
try to
follow
live
up?
up to
Okay,
it.
go ahead.
You alluded to something I wanted to follow up with, which is, are there disadvantages to being part of a lineage? And what I had in mind is, I see certain lineages get stuck in and unable to adapt to changing conditions in a world, the world of 2021 being very different from the world of the past. And so the being able to adapt to changing conditions, to new cultures and so forth, is that does being part of a lineage restrict anybody in that way?
It depends on how you define a lineage, Phil. If you define lineage as a bunch of dogma and rules, and you want to be stuck and identified with it, then you're definitely at a disadvantage.
Yeah.
But Acharya Dharma, the ancient Vedas say that an Acharya cannot be stuck by dogma and must reinterpret the knowledge honestly based upon the era in which they are teaching.
Right.
So I personally think that having a broken marriage is an advantage to me to teach in the 21st century than a disadvantage. And so all of that. So if a lineage is the lineage of the wisdom tradition that is accurate, and its interpretation and its dissemination can be a bit different, it's okay. But if you're going to say we have to wear the turban this way and we have to wear the mala this way and we have to, if you're going to be in that, then you're in an disadvantage period.
Right.
The Vedas are never about this. This is all human-made dogma. Yeah.
Acharya Shunya, I have a question, and then let's get into the book. But one question: I find you to be very clear and articulate in your descriptions of lineage, spirituality in general, and the stuff I've read of yours. A question that sometimes is asked, and it's not an easy answer when somebody comes who has no background in non-duality, and they ask the simple question, "What do you mean by non-duality?" How do you answer that?
I say that while we have different bodies and minds, there is something common between all of us. And that which is common is pure awareness. It is not physical, it is entirely spiritual. And the discovery of that commonality, that which unites us, is the journey of from duality, non-duality. And it's not that when we discover that, everything will become a homogeneous mass of awareness. We will still see differences, except that we will know that there is a unity that underlies this diversity. There is a oneness that underlies this duality. And knowing that is going to give birth to dharma, to compassion, to nonviolence, and to the higher way and a sacred way of engaging. So non-duality is an attitude change, it's a belief change, and it's a change at the level of knowingness. It's a cognitive understanding of the universe where you are able to grasp a commonality between all of us versus just seeing the separation that the mind perceives and then believing that's the only truth. So that's how I would describe it.
Well put.
Shunya, let's talk about your new book, From Sounds True, Sovereign Self. And oh, look, I'm looking at the back now and I see endorsement quotes from
From you.
One
You were
from
there.
me. There's one from me, yes. And 1, 2, 3, 4 people who have been on our podcast and our friends. The subtitle, Claim Your Inner Joy and Freedom with the Empowering Wisdom of the Vedas, Upanishads, and Bhagavad Gita. So you, as I look through the book, you are drawing extensively from the primary Vedantic texts and some from the older Vedas, and adapting them with modern language in a which is probably an advantage of having a householder lineage as opposed to a monastic lineage. Tell for our listeners why you chose to draw so much on the Upanishads and the Bhagavad Gita. Tell us the authoritative voice that why you chose to do it that way.
As an Acharya of a Vedic tradition, I'm an ambassador for these source texts. And I felt that sometimes we draw from them, but we don't give them credit. Sometimes there is appropriation going on, not just in the West, but in India too, everywhere. So I wanted to make people aware in the 21st century that there was an oral and then later a written tradition that is deeply helpful for our psychology, for our existential problems. That's one thing. Number two, whatever I teach or say, it is our habit to either quote our guru, that I didn't learn it. I learned it from the parampara. And the parampara then goes back to Shastra, the text. And then the texts then go back to the rishis and rishikas, the seers. And then finally, in our case, to Narayana Vishnu. So we have this parampara, and it is part of our training to always represent that. So even if I'm teaching how to consciously have boundaries in communication or relationships, which is a very modern issue, I'm not exactly teaching Chittavritti Nirodha. I'm not teaching that. I'm teaching how to be less agitated during an argument. Well, I'm excited to say that was the exact teaching of Krishna to Arjuna in the Mahabharata. And so I guess I'm the nerd or a scholar, and you'll identify with that. And I like to draw parallels. And I don't feel diminished by doing that. I don't feel like I need to own or be original in that sense, because as an Acharya, I believe that this knowledge is complete, and it is, and the definition of reality or truth in the Vedas is that which is effective in all eras, past, present, future, for all people, not just brown people or Hindus or vegetarians. And it is effective in resolving the human condition. And this knowledge is that kind of knowledge. So I feel excited to be its ambassador and to indulge my inner nerd.
Acharya, I wanted to ask somebody, one of our listeners hears you today, gets very inspired, gets your book, reads your book, gets more inspired. And if they were to come to you then and say, I want to move in this direction of spirituality, of understanding non-duality, not just intellectually, but experientially, what do you tell them to do for their next step?
Well, I hope they check out my website, which I'm sure you'll share. And then
we'll have that posted up, by the way. Give us your website.
It's just my name, acharyashunya.com. It's just my name. You can also go to awakenedself.com. It's the same website with different names.
We'll have all that posted up. Yeah.
Yeah. And then I have a 15-week course coming up. It starts on February 29th, and then it repeats again in August, and it's just going to repeat every year, twice a year.
So February 29th, this is
this year.
2021. Which is
yes, 2021. And then again in August, I don't have the exact date handy, but in 2021. And in this 15-week course, if people were delighted by my writing and they felt like something was awakening within them, they could come and join me in these very intimate conversations and contemplations, meditations.
And it's online, of course.
Yes, online.
So no matter where you are in the world, you can take it.
no matter where
Same
you
time.
are in the world. Yes.
Great.
So we're recording this in mid-February of 2021. We'll have it up. So if people listening to this early on will have the opportunity to sign up for your course at the end of February. If they listen later, they can do it in August or in the future. And I've never taken your course, but I'm going to endorse it in advance because your book is filled with instructions for practices, meditative practices, reflective practices. And I would guess that in your online courses, you will be giving the instructions verbally and giving and discussing the practices. And I would think that that's an advantage. As a fellow author, I know the challenges of putting instructions in writing and having people have to read and practice and all that. So I would think online you'll be sharing a lot of practices directly. Is that correct?
Absolutely. And then sharing from my heart, because I'm one of those spontaneous people. And, sometimes while teaching, my own emotions come up or a memory comes up. And, it's like really learning heart to heart or that kind of scenario. Yeah. I would have liked to sit under a tree and teach forever and ever and ever. But then now I have brought it down to 15 weeks, but
Well,
there's enough material to really walk away feeling much more clear than when we entered before. Yeah.
With your background here, and by the way, for those listening in, we're also available on a YouTube channel now on video, and there's a beautiful tree, and I feel like I'm sitting with a teacher who's sitting under a beautiful tree, giving knowledge. The other question that I would ask is, we are in February 2021. It's a very trying time. There's a worldwide pandemic. There's great division in this country. People are mostly looking politically on the outside for solutions. What do you recommend to people who want a more harmonious world and a more harmonious and healthy life?
oh, I think Acharya has frozen.
It usually comes back.
Have we lost you, Shunya?
You can come back on.
Uh-oh. This hasn't
While
happened.
we're waiting for her to come back on, maybe we could discuss some of
Okay.
generally. I think she will. Phil, oh, there you are.
Yes, just the two of us
If
now.
you reconnect with her, she could reconnect with you.
Well, we'll have to, here she is. She's coming back.
All right. And if you could hold up her book one more time.
Yeah, we'll
While we're
hear it.
waiting.
All right, Shunya, are you back? Ah, okay. Dennis was in the middle, was asking you a question when you
I asked the question about, we're in a very time of great division in the country, a global pandemic. Most people are looking outward for solutions through politics or whatever. What advice would you give to people that would want a more harmonious and joyful life in a more harmonious community and world?
Well, one, they should read Phil's book because it exactly
that is the correct answer. Thank you.
That's the correct answer.
That's part A of the answer, yeah.
And his book endorses my opinion that the world is a field of concerns, but the field of influence lies within. So if we
Right.
want to make a change or cope with the change, first cope with it and then make a difference. We have to go within and activate our inner resources, which I think both our books are about, and that's what I'm so excited about. Phil's book.
So I think that's brilliant.
And yours is much
So,
thicker than mine,
Yeah.
so you have much more in it.
I started TM in the 1970, and what motivated me was the world seemed upside down then, and everything outside wasn't working, and I heard about going inside. It was all new to me, and that made all the difference in the world. So I think
Very
you're
true, Dennis.
right,
Very
spot
true.
on.
Speaking of which, since you mentioned my book, I was a guest on your podcast, which is called Shadow to Self. So I wanted to make that known, that for our listeners to check out the Shadow to Self podcast that Acharya runs. I want to ask you a question. Do people treat you who are students of yours? Do they treat you in a traditional chela sort of guru and student way? Or do you prefer that they treat you in a in a different way? I'm just fascinated by the relationship that people have with teachers and the model of guru disciple that came to us from India, and whether people adopt that with you.
In my case, and so in my grandfather's case, respect is non-negotiable, but that's in every relationship. I like to be respected, and I like to be, I like honesty and truth. You might be gauging that now that we're talking more. But I am an informal person, and I dismissed with all that chela and, adulate. I don't need adulation. I self-adulate myself. I love myself, and I don't need that constantly. And I personally think that it's not the original Vedic way. That is a pathology that has emanated from India and traveled worldwide. This is not how true teachers and true disciples communicate. The teacher is a consultant, and the teacher says, this is what worked for me, this shall work for you, this has been mentioned in the text. And when it happens, the student bows to the teacher out of deep respect, but they've become equals in consciousness. And that is how it should be. So once a year, maybe on Guru Purnima, students bring a garland and they make it themselves and they thank me. And then I turn around and thank my parampara. And they are learning the same. And I have no room to develop a deviant spiritual ego at this stage of my life. I'm more excited about my own inner journey than like the watching who made the big garland and who made the small garland. It's irrelevant to me at this point. So I have a more informal, friendly, guiding, parental, and yet not too much. I'm also I speak very eloquently when I'm asked to, but I like to read and write. So I'm an introverted person. So I barely meet people. And I love it that everything is online now, because then I don't have to leave my house. So I'm a different kind of teacher, I guess. And it's okay.
And if I visit you when all this pandemic is over in the Bay Area and I don't touch your feet, you'll be okay with that.
Yeah, you'll just have to knock 3 times and I'll open the door and we'll have chai.
Okay.
What I wanted to ask as we're getting toward the end of the show, we have 2 minutes left though, and that is what your plans are for the future. Will you continue to give your 15-lesson course, 15-week course rather, and or do you have new plans going to the future? Are there advanced courses that come after that course?
We have found, and as you will see through the book, that the Vedas and Bhagavad Gita Upanishads were really supreme texts of human psychology. So this 15-week course is a preamble of sorts to a coaching for coaches, where I have a student who is a psychologist and a respected teacher of Western psychology who's taking my teachings and making it available for people to bring Vedic psychology teachings into mainstream psychology. So that's happening. I'm also opening kind of like a wisdom school where people can be a member, not necessarily a devotee, but a member of my wisdom school, where on a monthly basis, Phil, they learn the Vedic way, which is happy way, positive way, We have some festivals, some positive thinking, and ecology, consciousness, to bring all that like on a daily basis. People who don't want to go into self-actualization and self-realization, but maybe they can learn a new way to look at their family members,
Right.
a new way to have duty towards their parents. So some of those things I want to bring into the world,
Right.
not the Hindu way necessarily, but the conscious way from the Vedas. So a lot of exciting things. I'm also publishing a new book exactly next year in February 1st. It's coming out by Sounds True. It's called Roar Like a Goddess. It's for women, and it's called Every Woman's Guide to Becoming Unapologetically Powerful, Prosperous, and Peaceful. It's based on the archetypes of Lakshmi, Durga, and Saraswati. And growing up in India, I found how the Pandits had converted them into domestic goddesses to toe the line of patriarchy. But if you go into the deep mythology and the original teachings that my Baba gave me, my Guru gave me, and my mother gave me, these were out of the box goddesses. These were very powerful women. So it is a book on patriarchy and how it has seeped into women worldwide. It doesn't teach a simple rebellion. It teaches the dharma of truth and power, empowered dharma of, taking responsibility for your own life. So I'm very excited about that book
So
too.
when that comes out, you'll have to come back and visit us again.
I would
Acharya,
love that.
Exactly.
we have a few minutes left. Your previous book was called Ayurveda Lifestyle Wisdom. So obviously, Ayurveda is part of your training and your repertoire. Have you brought Ayurvedic teachings and integrated them in with the spiritual teachings in your work? And how relevant has Ayurveda been as a preventive and treatment modality during the pandemic?
Huge. And my community worldwide, I'm happy to say nobody has got pandemic, has been victim of the pandemic. And I also have a free e-booklet on how to prevent all kinds of infections, including this one on my website. And I want to say, Phil, that I actually am part of the revival of the classical Ayurveda, because the modern Ayurveda is, because of the colonial stamping in India, the way Ayurveda has emerged from India and being nestled in the West is we're just like so apologetic for our existence. We're trying to prove everything based on evidence, whereas it's the paradigm is spiritual. The energies cannot be seen and tested in a laboratory. So I teach the more Vedic Ayurveda, where there is a concept of consciousness, dharma being a medicine, truth speaking being a medicine. And so I am happy to tell you that Ayurveda Lifestyle Wisdom, through which you gave a beautiful testimonial, has become a classic in Ayurveda, translated in several languages across the world, and became top 10 books in alternative medicine in the year of its publication. And it continues to grow. And I think I'm developing a whole community of people, including practitioners of Ayurveda, who say, oh my God, we didn't know that these aspects of Ayurveda were still there, because we're so focused on doshas and fixing the body, because we mimic. In India, we mimic whatever's happening in the West. And once again, I had to go back and say, you know what? Let people do what they need to do, but I'm going to do what I believe in. And slow and steady, it's been a movement. And um, it's happening. Every day I teach Ayurveda, and I think it's my first love, kind of, because everybody has body needs, mental needs. And not everybody understands non-dual teachings, but Ayurveda, they do. So
very good. So that free booklet will come in handy, and I'm glad you mentioned
absolutely.
it, and our listeners should take advantage of that.
Yes.
Dennis?
We have a couple of minutes left, maybe 2 minutes left, and any final words you'd like to share with our listeners and viewers?
Well, I just think that if you do what you do, then you get to have the company of two amazing people and have a chit chat about your book. But ultimately, one of the reasons I was really looking forward to coming onto this particular podcast have been doing a podcast tour and a blog tour, like when a book comes out, but just knowing that you know what I'm talking about, where I come from, and you have a bird's eye view of what it means to be representing a lineage, and the different pathways that can be taken, and the somewhat self-defined pathway I'm taking, and yet holding this knowledge with great care is, it's nice to be seen. That's one thing, in the West. And number two, um, I think your book, Phil, The American Veda, helped me. I remember reading it in a flight to India many, many years ago. And it actually helped me because I realized that what happens when you're carrying this beautiful knowledge, and what's the moral responsibility of the custodian. It's not like I needed your book to tell me about that responsibility, but it definitely underlined how important it is in today's world of media and sycophancy, and the Westerners being sincere but not knowing even where Ayodhya is or what's happening, how it is important not just to teach, but to teach being grounded in your own self-restraint and grounded in your own rules, and clarifying that. So I just wanted to thank you for
Oh,
that. And Dennis, I've been watching the podcast that you guys
Oh,
have been
thank you.
doing and the conversations. It's just wonderful to
Thank
be
you.
here.
well, you're the best kind of guest. You
Real sweet. You
no,
have to come back.
thank you, and thank you for
Get the
returning the
book.
favor with Sovereign Self. It's very worthwhile for all of our listeners and viewers. Thank you so much, Acharya, for coming on with us.
Thank you.
Keep up the good work, and we'll be in touch, and look forward to the next book, which I'm
More
sure
conversations. Yes.
will be useful for men as well as all the goddesses. Thank you again. Take care.
Phil, it was Acharya Shunya. Before we get into our discussion, I do want to mention, I want to thank those people out there that helped get Phil and I keep us on the air, our podcast. And now, for those that might be watching this, we're also going to be on the YouTube channel. And so even better. But we have a
And look at this, we're wearing matching
we're matched.
outfits.
This happened naturally, but we're thinking of a uniform. But in any event, yes. So we're now available, audio, video, you name it, holograms to follow. And but for those that have contributed to keep us on the air, we appreciate it. Spiritmatterstalk.com. Go there. You'll see what you have to do to contribute. And yes, and for those that haven't done it yet, please. But we want to stay free and open to the public always. So that's our goal. So getting back, Acharya Shunya, wonderful guest, very knowledgeable, very bright. One thing I wanted to say, Phil, was she mentioned that she had a student and they're trying to bring Vedic knowledge basically to modern psychology. Well, I tried that when I was in graduate school in clinical psychology in 1970, and not everyone received it well. It was
50 years ago.
yeah,
Dennis.
it was like, where are you coming from? A few people did, but most of those people actually went in other directions. But now it's, even in the last 20, 30 years, it's not uncommon. It's very common actually for a psychiatrist, a psychologist to say, hey, why don't you learn meditation? Why don't you whatever? So.
Oh, well, first of all, the body of research is very convincing. And, people, it's practical. The teachings that someone like Shunya are bringing, and all the teachers who came from India, they're practical. So eventually people come around and they say, well, I was skeptical, but it works. It has value in life. I remember when I was first, like you, I was first teaching TM in 1971, I guess it would have been, or two. And I was invited to be on a panel about drug addiction. And it was all psychotherapists, social workers, people like that. And I talked about meditation and, inner happiness and peace as a preventive measure for, and also possibly as a treatment, part of a treatment. I got practically, I was mocked and ridiculed by people. That wouldn't happen now.
No, I'll tell you another story for our listeners and for us. And my father invited our friend Jack Forum, my TM teacher, to come and speak to his Rotary Club he was president of in about 1971. And it was a mixed response. They were okay with it. My father introduced it, so they were polite. But it wound up being put an article about it on the front page of the Wall Street Journal. It was a large article on TM, and it mentioned this. My father got all kinds of mail from all over the country. Some of it was good, but some of it was not good at all. So there's a
From the
little bit of that.
Rotarians, yes.
Yeah. But
well,
anyway,
things change. So here we
Yeah.
have Acharya Shunya, who represents a lineage in India, based in Ayodhya, which is a very sacred city because of, as you pointed out, its association with the Ramayana, where they're now building a new major temple. I look forward to going.
Is it still called Ayodhya, the town?
Yeah. So far as I
What part
know.
of India is it in, Phil?
North, somewhere up in the
Way up.
north, way north of Delhi.
North to Alaska, yeah.
Yeah.
All right, yeah.
And I find it very interesting because so many of the teachers who came here were, first of all, male, the overwhelming majority of them. That's changed a bit in recent times, but also monastic. And
Right.
the teachings, were very monastic, and there's elements of householder teachings that are that have never been translated and that have been ignored. And so having a householder who represents a householder lineage, who's very knowledgeable and deeply immersed in traditional knowledge, but able to adapt to worldly life in the 21st century, is a very welcome thing.
Right. She also, what I also liked was how she has embraced technology. And I remember, again, in the 70s, studying with Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, and he was very big into technology and how to roll out things quickly. But here she is, she's sitting in Northern California, beautiful tree behind her. Right? Obviously, she's got the lighting down and all for her podcast. And it looks great, and she can speak to anyone in the world at any time.
Yeah, this is great.
We can now through Zoom and
Yeah.
all. I mean, one of the pandemic is very bad, but one thing that's come out of it is the improvement of video, audio technology, things like Zoom. And why not? If you have somebody that's very knowledgeable, a great teacher. If in Buddha's time he had Zoom, imagine all the people he could have. I mean, seriously, it's
no. Look at Dennis. I have this perspective of having written American Veda and talking about all. I'm doing a course now in the history of it all, and one of the things that I keep noticing or emphasizing is how the teachers who came here had to adapt to the time. So Vivekananda in the 1890s, there was nothing like. It was just newspapers and magazines. That was it. Yogananda in the 20s, which is now 100 years ago, it's a century, he was able to get around much better with, the advances in the railroad system. But within a few years, almost everybody had a radio. So
Right.
he used radio broadcast. He used what was then a fairly new technology called mail order. People would, write in, send a coupon, and they'd get, an item from the catalog. But that was using modern technology. Then he used radio and all that.
I wonder in Yogananda, in the Self-Realization Fellowship, they used to send out their basic level lessons in a binder. I wonder if they're doing it online now.
Yes, they've finally they've adapted.
Yeah.
Yes, it's very recent. They've adapted, and they now have it you can download it and you can get it on your phone, apps and all that. So they have adapted, as Yogananda adapted, 100 or 80 years ago. And then, as you said, in the 60s and 70s, the gurus, then there was mass media and new technology. I, like you, remember when TM teachers would lug around these huge video recording machines and play tapes. And Maharishi Mahesh Yogi was forward thinking enough to video everything he
And it's
ever did.
interesting. I saw him probably in '68 in Maharishi, and it was on TV.
Yeah.
So again, modern technology. I just, I also thought it was very interesting. You asked the question about the attitude toward the guru and how her student. I thought that was very good, and how she explained that. And also, before that, when she said, "Look, I went through a divorce, but that's helped me relate to people in the 21st century a lot better than if I had come from some very, very traditional line of life that was, because she has the ancient wisdom, but in every way from her side, she can relate to people living in the contemporary world."
But and it's most of the teachers in the past who came out of the ashrams and took monastic vows early in their lives, they tried to adapt the teachings to the householder way of life. Yogananda did, Maharishi did, Muktananda did, Satchidananda did. They all did, but they themselves were monks, and so they didn't have personal experience in marriage or child raising to relate to these things. Some do. Some of the contemporary, Sadhguru, for example, was a householder. Satchidananda was a householder before he took monastic vows, but most of them were not, and they didn't have the experience, and as also the experience of living in America. When they came here, they were usually visiting, but the ones who stayed, like Acharya Shunya has stayed, and like Yogananda did, you see their teachings evolve over time as they become, accustomed to life in this world.
No, wonderful. And again, everything being online, I mean, there's the downside of it is people could, as we experienced in the pandemic, could live lives that are much more isolated. On the other hand, you realize the gift of this technology for bringing out good or bad, but preferably we are bringing out good in this show. And
no disinformation here.
No disinformation.
No false news.
Yeah.
And
it's
no conspiracy theories. This is
24 hours
an
a day.
oasis of truth. Truth comes first.
Have you met Acharya Shunya? So
and I've
does she ever speak in public, or is everything?
I have not had that privilege of hearing her.
But does she? Of course, is live.
I don't know what she was doing before the pandemic, but no one is now. Yeah, she was teaching.
She has a 15-lesson course coming up, and that'll be at the end of February 2021, and then rerun numerous times, so people can plug into that. Fabulous.
Okay.
I look forward to having you back,
Dennis.
Phil.
See you next time.
Literally see you.
And hey, viewers and listeners, look for that contribute button.
Please.
Okay. See you.